We will move on to House File 501. Oh, yes, and I would like, members can hear cell phones, so could you please silence your cell phones in the committee room? Thank you. Representative Finke, I will move that House File 501 be before us, and the motion will be to lay it over for possible inclusion. And with that, if you would like to present your bill, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members, and Chair Nash. For your committee time, I know it is at a premium this year. The HF 501 proposes a constitutional amendment that would protect all of our communities equally in the Minnesota Constitution. The ERA, as proposed, would prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, ancestry, disability, or sex. This is not a statement bill. The ERA, as we are proposing, makes important and significant changes to how our state defends the rights of all of our neighbors. Currently, not all of our friends and neighbors and constituents are afforded the same legal constitutional protections in the state of Minnesota. It is long past time for that to change, and that is why we are here today. And with that, I will reserve my comments for a closing and pass it to public testimony.
Thank you very much. And we have listed at this moment 5 testifiers. Jean Martinez, Advocacy Coordinator for ARC Minnesota. You'll state your name for the record and please begin your testimony.
Sure. My name is Jean Martinez. I am the Advocacy Coordinator for the ARC Minnesota. Thank you to Chair and Co-Chair Nash and members of the committee. I am here today to speak in support of House File 501, founded by parents of children with intellectual and developmental disabilities in 1946. The ARC Minnesota is a statewide nonprofit organization that promotes and protects the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we believe that this bill promotes human rights and should be passed. A Minnesota Equal Rights Amendment that explicitly prohibits discrimination based on disability would greatly benefit the disability community. Over Minnesota history, people with disabilities have faced barriers in employment, education, housing, and public accommodations, barriers that limit opportunities and independence. And although we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, state-level constitutional recognition would certainly strengthen these rights. The amendment would help close gaps in enforcement, making it easier to challenge discrimination in court and hold institutions accountable. It would also signal a clear commitment that discrimination against disabled individuals is not just illegal, it is unconstitutional. So thank you for the opportunity to support the proposed constitutional amendment, and I hope we have an affirmative vote in favor.
Thank you very much. And next we have Tenzin Shosang. Thank you. When you're ready, if you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good morning. This is particularly very interesting for me as a son of Tibetan immigrants to be here. I'm very honored. My name is Tenzin Shosang, but I am here representing the Asian American Organizing Project, which is an organization whose mission over the past decade has been to empower the over 200,000 young Asian Minnesotans to create systemic changes towards an equitable, conscious, and just society. We write in support of the Minnesota Equal Rights Amendment, HF 501, and we urge this committee and this legislator to empower Minnesotans to enshrine in our state constitution the most inclusive possible equal rights amendment. Equal protection under the law remains fundamental to the advancement of our democracy, yet too often do we see rollbacks on fundamental rights, many that specifically impact and target marginalized, underserved, and vulnerable communities. The Minnesota ERA would offer a powerful counterweight in providing everyone the strongest possible protections against discrimination based on race, color, national origin, ancestry, disability, or sex, including pregnancy outcomes, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation, no matter who's in power in the state government. The MNERA, particularly the provision protecting abortion access, has a high level of support for Asian Americans in Minnesota. A survey conducted by the Asian American Organizing Project found that over 80% of Asian Americans in Minnesota support abortion access. This amendment allows Minnesota the opportunity to cement the fact that reproductive rights are human rights. Should the MNERA pass both the legislative and ballot process, it would send a strong message to those who seek to undermine and repeal our inherent and intrinsic rights. That Minnesotans will not submit with silent reluctance, but will remain proactive in the defense of rights not just for ourselves, but our family, friends, neighbors, and for all who call Minnesota home. The Asian American Organizing Project is proud to once again stand in strong support of the MNERA, and we urge you to stand with your constituents. Our state constitution is one of the clearest reflections of our shared values as Minnesotans. Let us all work together to secure freedom, fairness, and equality in our Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for being with us today. Next, we will hear from Renee Carlson. General Counsel, when you're ready, if you'll please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Cleaver and Chair Nash and members. My name is Renee Carlson. I serve as General Counsel for True North Legal. House File 501, the supposed Equal Rights Amendment, expands the definition of sex, creating a problem it purports to resolve: inequality. It undermines longstanding legal protections for preborn children, people of faith, women, and girls. New protections based on pregnancy decisions would enshrine unfettered access to abortion on demand into the Minnesota Constitution. House File 501 also adds protections based on gender identity and expression, but not religion, giving judges a blank check to rewrite the law and interpret the proposed Equal Rights Amendment to narrow protections for religious organizations and people of faith. Including gender identity and expression would also require courts to ignore real biological differences, stripping women and girls of many long-standing legal protections. Under this bill, any legal distinctions based on sex must satisfy the highest level of judicial scrutiny. This level of judicial review will make it impossible to uphold many common sense distinctions in the law, protecting programs and opportunities for women and girls. This false notion of equality has already perpetrated an injustice against women and girls in our state, in sports, in prisons, in women's shelters, and even in schools. A few years ago, I represented a group of high school girls who wore plain clothes under their gym clothes because they were afraid to go into the locker room because the school had passed a policy that allowed males who identified as females to enter their locker rooms and private spaces. Members, this bill does not help them or remedy their concerns. Far from ensuring equality, under this language, the delicate balance of civil rights would be lost, along with equal protection under the law for all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate your being with us today. Next, we have Rebecca Delahunt. Welcome to the committee, and when you're ready, if you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Co-chairs Cleaver and Nash and members of the committee, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Rebecca Delahunt, and I work as a Director of Public Policy with Minnesota Family Council. The ERA would amend Minnesota's constitution to include, quote, "The state shall not discriminate against any person in intent or effect on account of gender identity or gender expression." Under this language, individuals will self-identify and presumably be entitled to so-called gender-affirming care. How do other jurisdictions handle this issue? The National Health Service of the UK commissioned Dr. Hilary Cass to conduct a study released in April 2024 of so-called gender identity services. Page 170 documents one of the many findings, quote, "Puberty blockers are intended to be a short-term intervention, and the impact of use over an extended period of time is unknown, although the detrimental impact to bone density alone makes this concerning. The review shared this with NHS England," end quote. After the results of the Cass report, as of December 2024, private sale and supply of puberty blockers in the UK is banned. New patients can only get prescriptions under clinical trial research. So-called ERA would also grant constitutional protection for self-identification, likely forcing females to share private spaces such as restrooms, locker rooms, and dorms, state grants, scholarships, athletic opportunities, prison facilities, and women's shelters with males who identify as female. We don't have to look too far to see how this would impact Minnesota. Former DOC employee Alicia Beckman shared a story in your packets about males housed at Shakopee Women's Prison. One of the males she shares about is Elijah Thomas Berryman, who's serving time until an anticipated release date of 2039 for criminal sexual conduct against a child. Bradley Richard Servio is serving life for homicide. As of this morning, April 3rd, DOC reports that both males are housed at Shakopee. One incarcerated woman at Shakopee, we'll call Janice, shared with Redux, quote, "Like most inmates, there's a fear of speaking up or voicing those concerns because of potential retaliation or because people will think you're being discriminatory or judgmental," end quote. Incarcerated women and their children housed at Shakopee now face high risk of sexual violence, a punishment which was not part of their sentencing. Women and children bear the consequences of a society which allows for so-called self-identification. Legislators may attempt to erase this reality by legislation, but this attempt will fail. Who will be the voice of justice for women and children? Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to testify on this bill? Please come forward. If you'll state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
Hi, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Karen Miller. I'm a wife, mother of 6, teacher, and author from Dakota County. I'm here to express my great concern and in opposition of HF 501, the proposed ERA. Certainly, we can all agree that with the Declaration of Independence assertion that every person is created equal and endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights that the government is supposed to protect. Our own Minnesota Constitution essentially states the same. In the preamble, it states that we are grateful to God for our civil and religious liberty. In Article 1, Section 1, it states, "Government is instituted for the security, benefit, and protection of the people, in whom all political power is inherent." Under Article 1, Section 2, it further states, "No member of this state shall be disenfranchised or deprived of any of the rights or privileges secured to any citizen thereof." In essence, we can see that our Minnesota Constitution already acknowledges broad, completely inclusive protections for the rights and liberties of all people and every member of this state. There is no authority given in the Minnesota Constitution to define the people or to classify the people that is written in the Constitution into specific categories of persons based on whatever the legislature enacts or how the executive department interprets freely. This presumption of authority defining persons would not be pursuant to the Minnesota Constitution and thus be null and void. Equality is the basis of the Minnesota Constitution, which is the law of the land. Therefore, this proposal for a constitutional amendment that provides highlighted protections for some specific protected classes to the exclusion of others is discriminatory and a complete violation of our state constitution. The language of these additions is also deceptive. For example, when voters read the word pregnancy, they will have no idea that by voting in favor of this amendment, they are actually voting to enshrine the right to kill the unborn as well. Of greatest concern, this particular proposed version of the ERA has absolutely no language to protect individuals' freedom of religion or conscientious rights. It has been omitted. There is no word listed such as creed or religion, which has been included in previous versions. Again, this is a flagrant violation of our Minnesota Constitution, which states in Article 1, Section 16, the right of every man to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience shall never be infringed. No one may be compelled to do something in contradiction to their religious beliefs or their rights of conscience. By highlighting specific protected classes while completely omitting protections for religious freedom and conscientious rights, this proposed ERA is a violation of our Minnesota Constitution, which you swore an oath to defend. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And then the last testifier we'll have on this bill is Betty Folliard.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, former representative, for being with us today. It's good to have you back in the House.
Thank you, Chair Cleavorn and members of the committee. Please pass House File 501. This bill provides equal rights under the law and prohibits discrimination of any kind. The aim of the inclusive ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, is to establish equality rights as an unassailable legal principle. Our state constitution is a dynamic document that is designed to be improved over time, reflecting our ever-evolving society. This new ERA language will acknowledge the pervasive nature of discrimination, help dismantle structural inequalities, and provide fundamental remedy and a foundational remedy to overcome them. By embedding constitutional protections in our strongest legal document, the ERA will secure remedies in our courts that cannot be easily eroded, while creating a framework for progress, both social, moral, and legal. Last week, on Equal Rights Day, on Equal Pay Day, in a bipartisan effort, the congressional chief sponsors, U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski and Congresswoman Ayanna Presley, introduced the resolution in Congress declaring the federal ERA the 28th Amendment. This was in a bipartisan effort, and I'm hoping for bipartisan support today. Now is the time for our state to join the 29 other states that currently have state ERAs. Some of them are 40 years old, and the oldest is 140 years old, so that Minnesotans have a chance to decide whether to embed Minnesota values into our Constitution, those values of freedom, fairness, and equality. Whether you agree or disagree with this effort, the vote you cast today on HF 501 will be to allow the voters to decide whether to put in our values, our Minnesota values, into our Minnesota Constitution. Let the voters make the final determination. Everyone deserves the same right to the same rights. I respectfully request your yes vote. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. And now we'll move to member discussion. Who's first? Representative Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Lee, for bringing this forward. I am very much in support, and I'll just say to one of the testifiers saying that we don't need to call out explicitly groups that in need of protection. We've seen at the national level that there has been disregard, or I guess these classes need protection because they are not, when there are lawsuits, they don't receive the same level of strict scrutiny that is needed, and so we need these protections explicitly laid out, and so thank you very much for bringing this. It's time to pass the ERA.
Thank you very much. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Finke, why did you not include religious perspective in this bill?
Representative Finke, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cleavorn and Representative. The Minnesota Constitution, the first clause of the Minnesota Constitution is the strongest legal protection for religious practice and freedom in the entire country. There is no way for us to interfere with that, and nor would we ever. The notion, and we can call up our lawyers if you'd like to have the legal discussion about what that means, but the notion that we are restricting religious practices is not just false, it's contrary to me and to what I would support. No state has stronger protections. Literally 0 states in America have a stronger protection than we do for religious practice.
Representative Davis, do you follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would argue that this is an attack on religious freedom, so I very much disagree with your statement there. We hear that reproductive rights are human rights. What about the human rights of preborn children?
Representative Finke.
Thank you, Chair Cleavorn. This bill does not take a stand on that. This bill asks Minnesotans to be able to take a vote on what they want their Minnesota Constitution to reflect. If the position that you're expressing were to be the position of the state of Minnesota, then we would not have these protections in the Constitution.
Thank you. And next we'll move to Representative Howard.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I had more questions. Or at
we
least another statement.
One more statement, and we'll move then to Representative Howard. Thank you, Representative Davis.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome.
I completely disagree with what you just said there, too. This bill is a direct attack on preborn children and their rights. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Davis. Representative Howard.
Thank you, Chair Cleveland. Thank you, Representative Finke. I just have two quick comments. First is that in years past, when we've heard a version of the ERA, one of the arguments against it we've heard is that we don't need it because we already have strong enough laws on the books to protect against anti-discrimination. And I just want to make the point that in our current environment, that argument couldn't fall more flat. I mean, we have a federal government that is expressly going after the basic rights of women and our LGBTQ communities. And when our federal government fails to meet a basic standard of decency, we need all people of Minnesota to step up to say, we believe that all people, not some people, shall be guaranteed equal rights under the laws of the state. The other comment I wanted to make is just listening to some of the opponents to this. First, a lot of those same groups were just fine with pushing a constitutional amendment to take away basic rights when they supported the anti-marriage amendment. But second, if you're so confident in this righteous position, why not ask the people of Minnesota if you agree? And I just wonder if it could be that if you know that the people of Minnesota do not support an exclusionary and narrow view of who gets to have rights and who doesn't. So in this moment, this is incredibly important to ask the people of Minnesota whether all people are entitled to equal rights under their state constitution, and I believe Minnesotans are ready to answer it. Thanks.
Thank you. That was more of a statement. So I will go to Representative Joy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Finke. Is this the same bill that came to the floor last year?
Representative Finke.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative, yes.
Okay.
Representative Joy.
So just to follow up, or just a statement, I guess, then. So this is or I guess one more question, Madam Chair. What happened to that bill
Representative
last
Joy.
year?
We passed it out of the House.
Thank you, Representative Finke. So the question was what happened to it, and the answer was we passed. I'm restating it because I spoke over you, so apologies. Representative Joy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, and when we hear in here, we want to put this on the ballot to let people have a choice. You know, in this body, we decide what comes in floor. You know, last year we passed a new state flag with 14 people. We didn't take it to the ballot to let the people have a choice. You know, it seems like we're picking winners and losers in this body, and I think that's wrong. I think we need to, you know, when we're trying to pass a bill like this, we feel this is more of a priority when it shouldn't even be talking, in my opinion, right now. When the flag, everybody got silence on that except for 14 people, and we had to take that on. So my opinion on this is vote no.
Thank you, Representative Joy. We have Representative Bonner.
Thank you. I do want to just say briefly that I think there's a fundamental difference when we talk about whether or not we should change our state flag and the fundamental rights of human beings. So I just want to be clear about that. I also want to say that when we talk about why do we need this, someone here suggested that our Constitution already alludes to this. But the highest courts in the land, when asked, Justice Scalia, a conservative judge, said specifically that while the Constitution does not encourage discrimination, it also doesn't forbid it. He was very, very clear on that point. And the same is true on the state level. In addition to that, This has never been about someone getting more rights than the other or more opportunity, perhaps. It is really about having an equal opportunity, an opportunity to prove yourself, to be who you are, to have the fundamental rights of your own personhood acknowledged. And under the course of the law, right now, because of that level of scrutiny, that does not exist. If we are to be discriminated against, any one of the folks listed in this bill, and go to a court of law, it would literally be a 50-50 roll of the dice on whether or not the laws of the land would be enforced and whether or not our rights would be upheld. And I don't know about folks in this room, but I can tell you that I don't feel comfortable having my rights be a roll of the dice. But more importantly, I will just end with this. Justice Ginsburg once said, this isn't about getting more or less. What she said was, specifically, all that we ask is that our brethren take their foot off our neck. We want equal opportunity. We want the right to be seen in a court of law as being equal and to have equal opportunity. That is what this law does, and specifically, it brings it to the voters to make that choice and determine whether or not all of these folks should be determined with the highest level of scrutiny as being equal under the law. Thank you for the amendment, and thank you for your work on this.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bonner. We have Kraft, and then we'll close with Chair Nash. Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Finke, thank you for bringing this and championing it, continue to champion it. I want to just briefly touch on something that was mentioned by one of the testifiers. And it's where they were picking out some issues that had happened in a prison committed by a trans individual. I don't know about that issue, but I hear this often. And the thing I want to emphasize is, of course, sometimes you can find things done badly by a trans individual because they're people. And the issue here is, but it obscures the key issue. And one of the things why it's so important that we have this in this ERA. A Department of Justice survey several years ago suggested that trans people were 9 times more likely to be sexually assaulted and harassed in prison than cisgender residents. And that crisis is fueled by their placements in facilities that don't match their gender. So we can pick out individual issues to try to scare folks, but the underlying issue, the underlying thing that we should be concerned about is the things that I spoke about. So thank you for championing this, and we should all be supporting this.
Thank you, Chair Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before I proceed, could we just clarify the motion that we had started off with, just
Yes.
for the sake of clarity?
Thank you very much. The motion is, I will renew the motion to lay this bill over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to make sure that we had clarified that. I wanted to start off by saying to my friend, Chair Howard, I really took offense to your rant on, I believe you called it righteousness or piety, because that was not something that I took that as questioning anyone's motives. So I just wanted to make sure that we set that very clearly in motion, that that was not an acceptable comment in my
And
opinion.
so is the word rant. So we will clarify
Madam
both
Chair?
of those.
Madam Chair, I'm just going to say, I don't come over the top of you, but you regularly come over the top of me, and that is also unacceptable. Members, I think that this, once again, we've had the conversation where religious protection is excluded. I find that to be just the wrong direction, and I think that this is not the direction that the state of Minnesota needs to be going. And I just want to throw out there that this is not the ERA that so many people think that this is, that there is a codification of many things that are not in the other ERA. And that is the sticking point of our objections to this. And I appreciate the committee's indulgence, and I know that this is being laid over. So with that, I will end.
Representative Finke, closing remarks on the bill, please.
Thank you, Chair Cleavorn. I appreciate the committee time. As I said, I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the conversation from all sides. I just have a few things I want to say to close. And I want to start with, the reality of what we are doing here is not hidden, right? To Chair Nash's point, people do understand what we are doing because we're not hiding anything. We are trying to protect communities that we believe need to be protected. There is no attempt to dissemble. We are here protecting what we believe needs protection. I do not begrudge anybody who holds any sincere values about these issues on one side or the other. If I did, I would not be able to be here. If I was not able to understand that people have a difference of opinion about what it means to exist in the world, I would not serve in this body. I'm not trying to change anyone's opinion. Their religious beliefs express as one wishes. It is protected in the Constitution with greater protection than any constitution in America. I want to only say that these communities, and yes, my community, trans people specifically, but communities that have individuals living with disabilities, people who are born in other countries, people who are the children of people who are born in other countries, it is not illegal. It is currently legal to discriminate against our communities. I think that people have this idea that discrimination is illegal. Discrimination is very much legal and protected act in this country in many ways, in many places. And there is a civil rights movement underway in this country. It is my community, but it is not only my community. And my community is being crushed right now by a federal government that is actively trying to eradicate our very existence. People on the side of the Republican Party in this body have apologized to me because those people know you are on the wrong side. History will remember that. History remembered that the 87% of white people who would move out of their community because a black person moved in was wrong. You do not have to change your opinion about abortion to want to protect people's pregnancy options. You do not have to change your opinion about what it means to be trans in order to wish that we did not destroy the entire community. I know that you will not change your votes. I know that we are not going to move this forward, but I want people to know, even your members know that you are wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Finke. And with that, I renew my motion that House File 501 be laid over. There's to be no clapping in this room.